All right, now we're ready to actually take that placeholder page and turn it into a real index page. So, next step. Let's go back into our app for a moment. And if we look at UCSB dates, we can see that UCSB dates, that page has a real table on it that shows us the UCSB dates. And if I were to create another UCSB date, let's create 2022-2 spring quarter registration passes start. I don't know exactly when they start, but I think it's about the 15th. So let's do 05/15, and maybe they start at 8 in the morning. Create. All right, so now I've got two things in this table. This page is the one I want to use as my model. So let's find the code for this page in the code base. If I go into VS Code and I look under source main components, UCSB dates, there is my UCSB dates table. So here is the code for a table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by copying this code into a UCSB into a table for our dining commons. So under components, I'll make a new folder called dining commons, and I will copy this UCSB dates table under here. Then I'll rename it from UCSB dates table to dining commons table. Now let's go through this and change what we need to change. First line, our table button column, that's fine. Our table, by the way, is a component that we developed, the staff of CS156, and it uses a library called React Table and then just does a little bit of customization on top of it. We'll look at that in a minute. Button column also comes from our table, and the button column, if I go back over here, you can see I've got an edit button and a delete button. That button column is a component that allows us to easily add buttons to our table to do whatever we need to do. So, oops, let me just cancel out of that. I'll come back and fix that later. And let me close that. All right, so there's the table that we're building. Let's go back into VS Code. So that's what the button column is. Use backend mutation is going to be needed for when we do the editing and the deleting. These come from something called UCSB date utils. We will need to create our own version of that when we get to doing deletes. I think that for right now, for dining commons, I'm going to comment these out because that's going to require a little bit of extra work. We won't include the delete and the edit function in our first version of this. We'll add those back in later. And so in the same way, I'm going to comment out, actually I'm just going to remove button column for right now. We won't use that until a little bit later. Use navigate, I don't think we're going to need that either. I'm going to comment that out for now. But has role, I think we will need. So export default function UCSB dates table. This is going to be actually dining commons table. And we're going to pass into this, not dates, but dining commons. And we're going to pass in a current user. So as you will learn as you read a little bit more about JavaScript and React, this right here, this is the parameters to this function, and they come in as a single object called props. That's a React convention. But by specifying this object here, this JavaScript object, we can do what's called destructuring those props into individual parameters. So dining commons and current user, those are the properties that are going to get passed into this React component. Use navigate, I commented out, so I'm going to comment that out here as well. The edit callback, I'm going to comment out because we're not going to use that yet. The delete mutation, I'm going to comment out because we're not going to use that yet either, as well as the delete callback. These are things that we will use once we add those button columns back in. Now we get to the columns. Here what we need is to specify a JavaScript array. So a JavaScript array starts with a square bracket and ends with a square bracket. If you've started on homework 7, you know that there are 3 ways of introducing a JavaScript variable: let, var, and const. The basic rule is always use const unless you have a reason to use something else. So for now, we're just always using const when we introduce a variable. This variable is called columns, and it's going to represent the columns in our table. If I go back to the table that we're using as our model, you can see that ID, quarter, YYYQ, name, date, edit, and delete are the names of the columns. And the accessor is the actual field in the field in the JavaScript object that we're going to get the data from. So what is that going to look like? Well, let's go back to Swagger for a minute, and let's look at our UCSB Dining Commons controller. And if I do a get all, and let me try it out. Right now, this is the only thing I have in the database for our Dining Commons. You can see it's one object, one JSON object, in this array of JSON objects. These are the things that we're going to want to put into that we're going to see in our table. So let me copy that, and this is kind of a typical way of doing this. I'm going to go over here, and let me just paste that in as a comment for now, and then I'll take the comment out in a second. So the header, the first header is going to be code, and the accessor is going to be code. The next header will be name, and the accessor will be name. And let me get, we don't need that anymore. Now, has sac meal, we'll put in has sac meal. And then the accessor will be has sac meal. So the header is what, actually, let's put in spaces there, because this is what the human user is going to see. And you know, maybe better yet, we'll just put sac meal ? Maybe that's what a human would want to see in the table. So we'll continue. Takeout meal ? And then this is going to be has takeout meal. And then we'll continue here with a couple more of these. We need commas in between each one. So has dining cam, we'll say dining cam ? Has dining cam. Latitude, so I will put just latitude there, and then this is going to be lowercase latitude, and then the next one is longitude. All right, so we have our headers. We don't need this anymore, so I'll take it out. Now here we have const columns if admin. Now what you see here is an example of this JavaScript spread operator. What we've done is we've said we're going to create a new array, and that new array is going to have in it all of the columns from the old array. So this expression here will basically copy and paste all of the columns from that array, and then we're going to add 2 other things, which are these button columns for edit and delete. For now, I'm going to comment that out. And then down here, we have columns to display, and we have this ternary operator. So the ternary operator is the question mark and the colon. It asks a question. Do we have the role admin? If so, we're going to use columns if admin. Otherwise, we're just going to use columns. Right now, I'm going to comment that out, and I'm going to replace it with columns to display equals columns. Later on, we will come back when we're ready to add in the edit function and the delete function, and we'll change this back to this columns to display. So now we have our table data equals, not dates, but dining commons. Columns is columns to display, and the test ID, this is what we're going to have so that we can find this in our application, Instead of UCSB dates table, it will be dining commons table. Okay, so now we have a component dining commons table, and that's ready to go. Now, what we might want to do is we want to see if this dining commons table, can we see one of these? There's two ways of doing that. One is we could plug in that dining commons table to our page, and that's what I'm going to do right now, just to kind of fast forward things. The other way is, now you may have been wondering, why are we bothering with this -docs and -docs QA repos and stuff when you did JPA03? We're going to begin to see the purpose of that shortly. Something called Storybook, where we can look at these components in isolation, isolate the front-end components from the back end. So when you worked with Swagger, you were working on just the back end. With Storybook, you can work on just the front end, and then you can work on the whole piece together. So we'll put that off for right now. We're going to actually see if we can use this dining commons table directly in the page. So now that we've got that together, let's go and look at, if I come back to let me come back to the app, which I believe is running on, there's localhost 3000, but I want the version on localhost 8080. So UCSB dates, this is the one that's working. UCSB dining commons right now, we just have a placeholder. So let's compare the page, the index page for UCSB dates, with the index page for UCSB dining commons and see how they differ, and see if we can get this one to come up with a table like the UCSB dates. So let's take a look in our code here. If we look at the page, the index page for UCSB dates, we can see it's kind of short. This is all we have. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace our placeholder page. So let me show you that. Here's our placeholder page for dining commons index page. We're going to replace this with the code that's in UCSB dates index page. So let me walk you through this before I do the copy and paste. What's going on here? First of all, you can see that at the top we have import React from React, because we're using the React framework. Import use backend. This use backend is a bit of JavaScript code that allows us to communicate between the front end of our application and the back end of our application. So we're going to use that widely. So we import that. Now, one question you might have is these braces here. What's the difference? Sometimes I do import and I don't have the braces, and sometimes I do import and I do have the braces. What's the difference? One key word, and that's the word default. If I look at, for example, basic layout, so let's go and look in layouts, basic layout, you see here it says export default function basic layout. And when you only have one thing in your JavaScript file, you can often do export default, and the idea is that anybody who imports this is what they're going to get. When you have export default, you don't need the braces. So if I come back over to my UCSB dates index page, I do import basic layout without the braces, because whatever the default export is from this file, that's what's going into basic layout. On the other hand, if I look at main utils use backend, so let's go down to main utils, and here's use backend. What you'll see is that here I have export function use backend, and I have export function use backend mutation. And so here, since I don't do export default, and I've got multiple things that I'm exporting, I need to use the braces when I import. So let me come back to UCSB dates index page, and you'll see that here with use backend and use current user, I'm using the braces because these are not default exports. They're just plain old exports. And when I have multiple things in a file, I can actually separate things. So if I needed to use backend mutation, I don't need it in this particular file. But if I did, I could separate these things by commas, and that's how I can import multiple functions from another JavaScript file. All right, so we're using React, we're using useBackend, we're using our basic layout. We are not going to use UCSB dates table in the other one, where we'll use our dining commons table, but in this case we're importing UCSB dates table, and we're also importing use current user. By the way, you'll notice that a lot of these functions begin with the keyword use, like use this, use that, use the other. Anytime you see a function that starts with use, this is an example of what's called a React hook, H-O-O-K. So a React hook, use prefix indicates a React hook. And I will leave that comment in there just for purposes of this lecture. We might take it out at some point, but I'll add that down on this one as well. I don't want to clutter up the code base with too many of these comments, but since this is a code base for beginners who are just learning React, I think in this case it's okay. All right, so those are our hooks. Now you might be saying, hook? What is a hook? You're going to hear lots more about hooks. Hooks are very special. They play a special role in React. But let's not get into that right now. Let's just set that aside for now. But just know that whenever you see use, we're talking about something that is a hook. Okay. So here I have at the top of this, const current user equals use current user. What this is going to do is going to use this React hook, and it's going to give me the value of the current user. And that's going to let me know whether the current user is not logged in, or is logged in, or is logged in as an admin. And that will help us decide, what to do here. Now, here we have const data :dates error _error status _status. Whenever you see a variable that starts with an underscore, that indicates that that is a variable that is not currently being used. And so it turns out that we have set things up that if you have a variable that's not used, you're going to get a flag. You're going to get a flag on the play when you try to deploy this on GitHub. It's going to one of the jobs is going to fail with the red X saying, "Hey, you've got variables in your code that are not being used." Kind of the escape hatch there is to put an underscore in front of them. So one bad thing is that right now we're not checking the error status on this this call, which is not a good idea, but it is what it is. In any case, right now we're calling useBackend, and what we have here is basically a key that is used for a cache. What's going to happen is it's going to try to call this get method on this backend route. So this is where we're using the backend routes that you defined with Swagger. It's going to call that, and it's going to cache the value using this key. And then that value will be available to us. That data will be available to us in this variable called dates, which we can then pass into our UCSB dates table along with the current user, and we should see the dates. So that's kind of a walkthrough of the code. Let's take this code now that we've understood it at least a little bit, and we're going to go over to Dining Commons index page, and we're going to take all of our placeholder code away. We're going to replace it with this. So now we need to go back through, and everywhere we see UCSB dates, we need to replace that with Dining Commons. So this is going to be a Dining Commons table, and it's going to come from, let's try that again, main, components, Dining Commons table. And you'll see that right now it's kind of grayed out in VS Code because it knows that we're not using it yet. As soon as we actually use it somewhere, it won't be grayed out anymore. Export default UCSB dates index page. This should be Dining Commons index page. Data is not going to be dates, it's going to be Dining Commons. And instead of UCSB dates all, what we want here is Dining Commons all. But here is where what I need to do is check in Swagger and make sure that this route actually matches the real route. So let's go over to Swagger right quick and let's look, and it looks like it is API UCSB Dining Commons. So here we need to use the actual value that is in the backend API. So we will change that to API UCSB Dining Commons. And I believe it is UCSB Dining Commons. Okay, this is API UCSB Dining Commons. We want, though, this one, API UCSB Dining Commons all. So this is the route that gives us the list of all the dining commons. That's what's going to populate our table. So now, instead of UCSB dates table, this will be dining commons table. This will be dining commons. And this will be dining commons. Now we could add the UCSB on this if we want, since this is just a header on the page. And in principle, if I did everything right, this should now give us a beautiful table of our dining commons. I am guessing that there will be, I have made some error somewhere along the way because I'm just only human. So we'll find out. Does it work the first time? It would be astonishing if it did. So over here, you can see this is the page where I did my NPM start. And if I have errors, they will show up on that page or on that screen. So we can see that the dining commons table failed to compile because has role is defined but never used, and unused variables need to have the underscore in front. So let's go to diningcommonstable.js. So that's dining commons index page, dining commons table. And let's find somewhere in here is current user. You can see we're not using it right now, so we'll stick an underscore in front of it, and that should help. And then over here, it already recompiled that for me. Has role is defined but never used. So let's come over here. There's import has role. So I can actually just comment that out if it's never used. And now it says compiled successfully. So that's good. So now I can look at this in the in the web browser, and let's go to list dining commons. And what I'm seeing on dining commons is actually UCSB dates. What? All right, let's see if we can figure out why that happened. So let's go back to our code, and if I go to our dining UCSB dates index page, UCSB dates table is coming from main component UCSB dates table, so that seems reasonable. If I look at UCSB dates table, here's UCSB dates table, and that also looks, what? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, I think I did here. This is like a classic error, and I make this error all the time. Look at this. Here's my UCSB dates table, and this has dates in it. Here's my dining commons table. It has dining commons in it. Let's go back to our dining commons index page. So our dining commons index page is coming from dining commons table. That seems reasonable. And if I look under dining commons table, all right, so this is dining commons table. All right, I'm not seeing it yet. So staff, if you can, or students, if you can also be my pair partners here, let's see if we can figure out why this isn't working. So what I'm seeing is that on my UCSB dates page, I see UCSB dates. Under to-dos, I see this is where the index page will go. Under UCSB dining commons, I go to list dining commons. But what I'm seeing is UCSB dates. Now, my first suspicion is that maybe in app.js, I mapped this URL to the wrong page. So let's go take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. Let's look in app.js. And in app.js, oh, I see, Dining Commons list goes to Dining Commons index page. All right, well, that seems reasonable. Let's look at Dining Commons index. Oh, but let's look at the top here. Dining Commons index page does come from pages, Dining Commons index page. Here's Dining Commons index page. And this says Dining Commons table, UCSB Dining Commons. So why then am I seeing, when I go to list Dining Commons, why am I seeing this? It's not a trick question. I really don't know. I am confused. So how can we debug this? Well, first of all, let's see. What's, does Developer Console show anything? So that's a good question. So one of the things that we can do when we're debugging is we can go here to inspect. We can look on the console, and yeah, I don't really see anything. There's not really any clues here, but if I refresh the page, okay, now I think what was happening is I think I was getting something that was cached. So once I refresh the page, now we're seeing errors. So I think what happened was I had copied and pasted that in, and I was seeing the old version. So here, cannot read properties of undefined reading for each and access rows at use table. The above error occurred in the our table component. And I also see no routes matched Dining Commons /list. So let's refresh the page again. No routes matched, but I think that one actually is a red herring. I think that one comes up all the time, and I think we don't want to pay attention to that. Instead, I think instead the error here is probably something having to do with our data. So let's take a look. Let's go back into our Dining Commons. And one of the things we can do is we can go into our basic layout here, and let's, for the time being, comment out the Dining Commons table part and see if we can at least just see this header 1 UCSB Dining Commons. Let's see what happens if we do that. So if we come back, so now, of course, that we commented that out, it's saying that Dining Commons is unused. So let's come up to Dining Commons table, and we'll put an underscore at the beginning of that and refresh the page. Current user is assigned a value but never used. So let's stick an underscore at the start of that. Refresh the page. Dining Commons is assigned a value but never used. Fine. So we'll stick an underscore in the front of that. All right. So now we see that we are at least on the right page. So now the problem appears to be with this Dining Commons table. So this is probably a good opportunity for us to switch over to trying to debug the Dining Commons table by itself separately. This brings us to Storybook. So let me come down here, and I'm going to stop the front end and the back end. And in this directory, I'm going to do npx run, or actually, I think it's npm run Storybook. Now, what does npm run Storybook do? It brings up a separate website, and very similar to the way that Swagger is kind of a automatically constructed website that's a view of our backend, Storybook is an automatically constructed website that's a view of our front-end components. So it allows us to look at each of these components of our user interface, each in isolation. So you can see here under app navbar, we have an example of a navbar with no role, an example of a navbar when we're an admin, and we can interact with this, and you can see there's the different parts of the user interface. But if I click log in, it doesn't work, right? So parts of this don't work, but we can see at least what the different pieces of the user interface look like. And if I go to our table, here's an example of a dummy table, and it shows kind of how I can sort by column 1 or by column 2. And if I look down at UCSB dates, you can see here's our UCSB dates table. I can see what it looks like when it's empty, and I can see what it looks like with 3 dates in it. What we're going to do right now is we're going to develop a storybook component for our dining commons table, similar to this UCSB dates table, so that we can debug the dining commons table component in isolation, because clearly right now it's got some bugs in it, and it will be easier to debug that in isolation separate from the whole rest of the application. So here's how we do that. We go back into VS Code. Let's go again to the top of our front-end directory. So here's front-end. Let me close up all these different directories here and show that under front-end we have source. Under source we have fixtures, main, stories, and tests. We're going to go into our stories directory, and we're going to go under components. And you can see that we've got a UCSB dates folder. I'm going to add a new folder here, and we're going to call this Dining Commons. And under UCSB dates, you see I have UCSB dates table stories. I'm going to put under Dining Commons, rename, going to call this Dining Commons table stories. So let's, we copied and pasted, and I'm going to edit Dining Commons table. And instead of UCSB dates table, this is going to be Dining Commons table. And it's going to be main components. This will be Dining Commons / Dining Commons table. Good. Now I've got UCSB dates fixtures. I'm going to change this to Dining Commons fixtures. And I'm going to change this to fixtures Dining Commons fixtures, which means we now need to do a little side trip into what are fixtures. So let's go into our fixtures directory. And you can see in here I've got current user, student, system info, UCSB dates fixtures. I'm going to copy and paste from UCSB dates fixtures, and I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this Dining Commons fixtures. Now, what is this file? It's simply a hard-coded list of some example values. So const dining commons fixtures equals, and I'll say 1 dining commons. And what I'll do is I'll put an object here, and for this object, I'm going to go to the UCSB dining commons, and this is before class, I pasted a credential that you can use for this website. And this is a website where you can explore the actual APIs. You can see this looks a lot like our Swagger website, and there's a reason for that, because it was in fact built with Swagger. This is sort of a real live use of Swagger to build real APIs for the university. And right now I'm looking at the API for the Dining Commons, and I'm going to take that one value for Creo, and I'm going to paste it into our fixtures. So this 1 Dining Commons is going to be Creo. Then I'm going to say 3 commons, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the values out of this array, and I'm going to go over to the UCSB site, and I'm going to grab 3 of them. So let's grab, since we already got Creo, let's grab De La Guerra. Try to copy here, De La Guerra, and whatever those 2 are. Going to copy those 3. Going to paste those into our code. So let's see. I now have De La Guerra, Ortega, and Portola. And those are my 3 dining commons. And down here at the bottom, I'm going to export dining commons fixtures. So I now have 1 dining commons object, and then I have an array of 3 dining commons, and I can use those to build my stories, to build my tests. So let's now return to Dining Commons table stories. I now have Dining Commons fixtures. Export default title instead of UCSB dates. Let's make this dining commons and dining commons table. And dining table. This will be dining commons table. This will be dining commons table. And then what we have down here is I can see what it looks like when it's empty. And instead of dates, it will be dining commons. And instead of dates, it will be dining commons. And this will be dining commons fixtures dot 3 commons. And with that, I should be able to go to my storybook and see my dining commons table. Now, the thing is, we already know the dining commons table has some bugs in it, so maybe this isn't going to work, but let's see what shows up. So I'm going to do npm run storybook again and wait for it to build. We'll see if there are any errors. It could be that I get some error messages while building this, and indeed, if I go to dining commons table, the empty one looks pretty good, right? That looks like what we expected. And that looks like what we expected as well, right? And you can see that if I sort this, that seems to work pretty well. But latitude and longitude, not so much. And I think I know why. When we go to the dining commons fixture, you can see that the latitude is actually location.latitude and location.longitude. You can see how latitude and longitude are nested inside another object here. I think that's the mistake that we made. If I go to our dining commons, let's see, what do I need here? I need our dining commons component, dining commons table component. Our accessor is not going to be latitude, it's going to be location.latitude and location.longitude. With that change, let's see. Oh, look, see in my storybook, I now have the latitude and longitude, so that's helpful. Sack meal, takeout meal, and dining cam are not showing up. And there's a trick for this. It turns out that Boolean fields don't play nice with this table unless you do a special thing. And I believe that if we look at our users table, I think, let me take a look. If I look under users table, this admin where it says true or false, I think I need to look in the code. So let's look in the code at our users table. And there it is. There is the special magic sauce that you need. There's even a comment there. It says hack needed for Boolean values to show up. Let me grab that and go to our dining commons table. And since these are all Boolean values, I think what I need here is row.has sack meal. And let's try just that first one. Okay, yep, 5 minutes left, I see it. And let's look at our storybook for dining commons table. And you can see that sack meal is now showing up. False, true, true. Let's do the same hack on takeout meal and dining cam. So here we go, has takeout meal. This is going to be has takeout meal. Now we need to check our fixture data to see if, in fact, that's the right spelling. For right now, I'm just going to hope that I'm feeling lucky. Has dining cam. We'll see whether those work properly. If I look back at the storybook, yep. Oh, wait, takeout meal undefined. So that one I probably have some problem. Let's look at the data. And it looks like has takeout meal. I need to camel case T, O, and M. So has takeout. The O needs to be camel cased. And now you can see that all the data is coming up. So you can see how working with the storybook I can isolate some of these errors and find them a lot more easily than working with the full app. So hopefully, now that those errors are fixed, let's see what happens if I return to the full app. So I'm going to start up again the back end, and I'll start up again the front end with npm start. And let's go to the app. Let's go to UCSB Dining Commons, list Dining Commons. We commented it all out, so now we're not seeing anything. But let's see what happens if we go back to our Dining Commons index page. Dining Commons index page under Pages. That is because it's under Stories. I need to close up Stories. Let's go into Main. Under Pages, Dining Commons index page. And let's uncomment this, which means now Dining Commons is used, so I need to get rid of the underscore there, and the underscore there, and the underscore there. And let's see what happens if I go back over here now to my front end and refresh the page. Okay, so now once again we are getting errors. Cannot read properties of undefined, reading for each. And we may or may not have enough time to debug this before we are done. But when you see this cannot read properties of for each, it suggests that the problem, oh, I see it. I see it. A Dining Commons table doesn't have dates. It has Dining Commons. That was probably the problem all along. Oh, look at that. Yay. Look at that. We now have Ortega, true, true. Not sure what's up with our latitude and longitude. Maybe I entered them incorrectly. Actually, I think I do know what's going on here. I think that the API has latitude and longitude nested inside location, but I think our backend does not. So if we look on Swagger and look at UCSB Dining Commons controller and do a get, and let's try it out, execute. Yes, you will see that latitude and longitude in our backend is not nested under location. So the fix here, and we have almost 60 seconds. I think we have just enough time to make this fix, is if I go back into our fixtures, so under Dining Commons fixtures, let's take out that extra location layer, because that's not present in our data. And let's fix that up. Oh, one more. Okay, so we've taken that extra layer out. And we do need a closing brace there. Hopefully I got my JSON syntax correct. Then if I go back to our stories and look in our components, actually that should be fine. The place I need to fix it is in the Dining Commons table, and it's in the, here, latitude and longitude. So boom, and now let's see if everything is copacetic. So it looks like our storybook, actually I'm not running the storybook, so I'll have to rerun that. But indeed, now latitude and longitude works. Okay, I am going to call it a day at this point. That's where we'll stop. But let's just quickly review what have we seen. We've seen how we can do some front-end development, and we've seen how we can create something new on the navigation bar, how we can add first a placeholder page, and then a component that will list data from a table in our backend. So thanks, everyone. We will end it there. and I will stop the recording, but I will stick around for a couple minutes in case anyone has questions. Okay.